Two Autobots can have the same record and end up with opposite reputations. This fandom has been applying one rule for 40 years, and it has almost nothing to do with how well the character is written. Bumblebee start with Bumblebee, because he is the one most people get wrong. In 1984, he was the smallest thing on the roster, the audience surrogate, the one kids were supposed to see themselves in, and it worked, because he was outmatched in every episode and turned up anyway. He was not the strongest Autobot or the most important one, and that was the entire appeal. Nobody resented that version. There was nothing there to resent. The complaints that came later were never really about the character. When Hasbro launched the Hall of Fame in 2010, its own announcement noted that more than 7,500 robots were eligible for that first class. 4 went in by decision of an internal panel of judges: Optimus, Megatron, Starscream, and Bumblebee. Fans were given exactly one slot to fill themselves and spent it on Dinobot, a Beast Wars character from 1996. He was not voted in, he was seated. Everything since has followed the same pattern. The broken voice box gimmick that fans still cannot stand, the endless toy variants, and screen time taken from Autobots with 40 years of history so the mascot could have another scene. In 2018, the franchise went the whole distance and named a film after him, the only time that has ever happened for a single Autobot, and it made $468 million. Every reboot since 2007 has been built outward from him. The roster changes, the tone changes, the continuity resets, and he is the fixed point that survives all of it. The company built the marquee around him. In 16 years, it has never once put him in front of the people who buy the toys and asked them to confirm it. Which is why the Autobot who has stood in front of them and lost is untouchable. Grimlock. Grimlock does not take instructions. He is the Dinobot commander who openly challenges Optimus Prime's leadership, and that insubordination is the entire basis of the affection. He is not the loyal soldier who waits his turn. He is the one who tells the leader he is wrong to his face and then survives being right. There is a version of him in almost every continuity, and the fandom treats none of them as the definitive one, because what they are loyal to is the posture rather than any single portrayal. Watch what Hasbro did with him. When the company wrote his official Hall of Fame profile, it drew on his comic incarnations rather than the dim, childlike version it had been putting on television for years. Then it put him on the 2011 fan ballot against Jazz, Shockwave, Waspinator, and a Constructicon reject called Erector. He lost. The fandom's vote that year went to Waspinator, a Predacon whose main achievement is getting blown apart in every episode he appears in. Hasbro inducted Grimlock outright the following year, and losing an open election changed nothing about how he is regarded, because his standing was built somewhere a ballot cannot reach. Grimlock kept his reputation while being written badly and while being beaten by a joke. The next Autobot was written badly too, and had something extra working against him. He was given a name. Queke arrived in Dark of the Moon carrying the Wheeljack identity, and that name had 27 years of goodwill attached to it. Anyone stepping into it begins with credit in the bank. A name in this franchise is not decoration. It carries 4 decades of accumulated work, and the audience treats it as something a new version is measured against, rather than something it simply receives. He spent it in a minute. The design gave him a lined, elderly human face, and the fandom rejected him on sight. Not as a weak character, as a fraudulent one. The recurring line in those threads has never been that he was boring, it is that they did Wheeljack wrong. He got a death scene built for sympathy, and for some viewers it landed. It changed nothing. The verdict came the following year. In 2012, the fandom had one fan choice slot on the Hall of Fame ballot, competing against the entire roster, and it used that slot to induct Wheeljack. Not the version in the film, the original. 1 year after the movie, they voted the real one in and left Quay outside, and he has never appeared again. Quay died in that film, and the fandom moved on inside a week. Another Autobot died in the same film, and they are still angry about it. Ironhide never held rank. He is Optimus Prime's oldest friend, which in most stories is a shortcut to command, and it never once was. 40 years of being the most dependable name on the roster, and never the name above the door. He appears in almost every major continuity, and he occupies the same position in all of them, one rank below the decision, doing the part of the job that gets him shot at. Hasbro's panel put him into the 2011 class without a vote, the same route Bumblebee took, and not one person objected. The write-up explains why. It described him as a battle-hardened warrior who had earned his place among those in command. Earned, for a character the franchise never actually promoted. Then, Dark of the Moon executed him, close range, no battle, by an Autobot who had his trust. The backlash was immediate, and it has not cooled since, and it is still the benchmark fans reach for whenever the films kill somebody. The bot who pulled the trigger arrived with everything Ironhide was never handed. Sentinel Prime. Sentinel Prime does not get a fair hearing here, and the defense of him is real. He is routinely called the only live-action villain with coherent, tragic motivation, closer to a Shakespearean figure than anything else in those films, and people who take the movies seriously will argue he is the best antagonist the series produced. The fandom heard that argument and threw it out. Look at what he is. He arrives pre-approved. The legendary predecessor, the founding leader, a reputation the film simply asserts before he has done a single thing on screen. He is introduced as somebody the audience is expected to revere on sight, and every ounce of authority he holds is inherited. The elitism gives it away long before the betrayal does. This was never an argument about writing quality. It is an argument about where authority comes from, and it is the first time in this franchise you can watch the rule operate in the open. The receipt is in the ballot. Dark of the Moon was the biggest Transformers film of 2011, and the fan vote that followed it in 2012 put 5 names in front of the fandom: Arcee, Beast Wars Megatron, Rodimus, Wheeljack, and Skybite, a Decepticon shark from a children's cartoon that lasted 1 season. The biggest new Autobot in the year's biggest Transformers film did not make the list, and he has not appeared on one since. The same inheritance was handed to another Autobot 25 years earlier, and it ended in the opposite place. Ultra Magnus. In 1986, Ultra Magnus was given Optimus Prime's job. Fans found him stiff, rigid, and inadequate. A large blue placeholder standing in a space he had not filled, and that was his reputation for most of 3 decades. One reveal changed it. Ultra Magnus is not a person at all. It is an armor suit, and inside it is Minimus Ambus, a small, obsessive, rule-bound bureaucrat who had to qualify to wear the name. That is the whole fix. The title stops being an inheritance and becomes a standard with entry requirements, and anyone wearing it can be measured against it. It also means the last holder stops being a ghost the new one has to live up to, because the requirement sits in the armor rather than in the memory of whoever wore it before. The institution confirmed it fast. In 2013, Hasbro dropped automatic inductions completely and left every Hall of Fame slot to the fan vote. 2 names went in that year, and one of them was Ultra Magnus. The character they had spent decades calling a placeholder was the first one they chose the moment the choice was actually theirs. That vote is worth watching, because there is one Autobot it has never gone near. Wheelie was assigned a function, the child's way into the story, dropped into the 1986 film, carried through the 3rd season of G1 and the Japanese Headmasters series. The intent was sound, and the franchise had done it before. The execution ruined it. The shrill voice, the constant rhyming, and the unmistakable sense that the writers decided what he was for and never got around to who he was. He has been the default answer to the most annoying character question in every forum since, usually described as the lowest hanging fruit in the argument. The comics later gave him a serious, well-regarded dramatic arc, and it moved nothing. Then there is the ballot. Since 2013, the fandom has chosen every inductee itself: Ultra Magnus, Rodimus, Arcee, Prowl, and in 2016 Cosmos, a minor G1 minibot most casual viewers could not identify. In 2011, that Constructicon reject, Erector, came close to winning the whole thing as an organized joke campaign and got his own mockumentary at the ceremony. Given a free vote, this fandom will spend it on an obscure spaceship or a punchline before it spends it on Wheelie. Hasbro keeps making him anyway. He turns up in the live-action films, he turns up in studio series, and the production line keeps running for a character the fandom has spent 40 years refusing to claim. The company has overruled its own audience on this one for 4 decades and shows no sign of stopping. Wheelie shared that 1986 film with the one Autobot who was hated more than he was. Only one of them got out. Hot Rod was blamed for the death of Optimus Prime. That is not quite what the film shows, and it never mattered. The Matrix passed to him, he became Rodimus Prime, and a generation of children decided he was the kid who got their hero killed and then took his chair. He carried it for decades, and it never softened into argument. It stayed contempt. He spent the back half of the 80s being written as a leader nobody in the audience wanted, and the franchise eventually stopped trying to sell him. Then More Than Meets the Eye put him on the lost light and made one change. It let him know he had not earned it. The captain in that book is loud, reckless, and privately certain that everyone can see he is faking the job, and the entire run is a character trying to become someone who deserves a title he already holds. The book never pretends he is better at the job than the leader he replaced. It shows him knowing the gap and working inside it, where everyone on the ship can watch him do it. In 2014, the fan vote inducted Rodimus Prime into the Hall of Fame. The people who put him there are largely the same people who spent 20 years blaming him. So the rule was never about how the rank arrived. Ultra Magnus was handed the top job, and Rodimus was handed the Matrix, and both of them are now in the Hall by public vote. Bumblebee was handed a seat, and Sentinel was handed a legend, and neither was ever asked to pay for it afterwards. What this fandom refuses to forgive is not the promotion, it is the invoice that never came. He never earned the Matrix, he earned every year after it.